Welcome back to Ben's Garage. We're not outside in the garage today because the weather is absolutely rubbish. And I've got a few bits and pieces doing inside today. I was reminiscing not so long ago about being out on two wheels. I'm not that bothered. I mean, I've been a biker for quite a few years. You know, since I was 16, I've always had a motorbike, pretty much. We've had slow motorbikes, we've had very fast motorbikes. I don't really miss it. I'm quite happy now just potting around on the tractor, cruising around in the comfort of the Range Rover. If I could still ride a bike, I probably would still have one because before I ended up in the wheelchair, I'd bought a motorbike in France. It's not my ideal motorbike, but it was a Suzuki Bandit 1200, but it hadn't even done 4,000 miles. It was mint, absolutely brand new condition. Got it quite cheap, 1,600 euros. Ended up in hospital, and I only ever rode it once before I ended up in hospital. So we sold it. But I thought we'd have a bit of a recap, my history with motorbikes. So if you're not really interested in motorbikes, switch off now, basically, because this video is all going to be about motorbikes. So we'll go back to the beginning. When I was 16 in... 1993? Is that when I left school? Can't remember now. Anyway, first motorbike on the road, Yamaha FS1E. It was 20 years old when I got it. All my mates was getting like newer bikes, Honda MT5s, Kawasaki AR50s, MBX50, all that kind of thing. I had the FS1E. It was P-Reg, 1975. The pedals were fixed because years ago the law stated that if you could start it with the pedals, you could ride it on provisional license or something. Anyway, the pedals were fixed because by the time I got to riding a bike like that, you didn't need... the rules had changed. Anyway, first bike, FS1E, absolutely stonking machine. 62 miles an hour flat out. It had a 65cc big bore kit on it. Micron rip speed exhaust. Little drum brakes, so you get to 62 miles an hour and you want to try and stop it. Not a hope in hell. You had to put your feet down almost. Got to the point where that bike was quite unreliable. I was travelling about 10 miles to work every day. And quite often it would break down. Every 2 or 3 days it would break down. The gearbox went, so we took the engine out, split the case. Dad got this stick welder on it. Quite vicious with the old welder. It didn't hold very well the first time. The second time it did it, we took it apart, welded it up again. Big old blobber weld, I can't remember what bit had broken. After that, it changed gear perfectly. But it just wasn't reliable. So because I needed it for work, 16, I was on the old YT scheme, £29.50 a week. I was giving 10 of that to my mum, and about 10 of that was in petrol for the week. So I upgraded. We bought the Honda MT5. Oh my God, what a revelation. I didn't have to mix the petrol because the petrol went in the tank and the oil tank was behind the seat. You just pulled the bung out, filled that up with 2-stroke oil, and it mixed itself. Whereas with the FS1E, you had to do it all, mix it all up and put it in the tank. Downside to that, I picked it up 32 miles an hour, flat out. Absolutely gutted I was. I tried all sorts. I didn't go for the big bore kit because they were quite a bit... On the FS1E, the big bore kit was £28, I remember. Bought it at the Exchange and Mart. Big bore kit on the MT5, which my mate had the MT5 with the big bore kit on it, and that was about £50. And I you know, it's a lot of money when you're 16 on £29.50 a week. So I put the exhaust on it. I changed the reeds, and I found the best way to get the most performance out of it was to put new piston rings on it every fortnight. It might sound a bit daft, but that got it doing 45 miles an hour. Passed my car test, and I had a bit of a break from motorbiking. Anyway, I was never too far away from bikes, so before I passed my test, I bought a Yamaha RD250. Now it was exactly the same as this one in the picture, but mine had a Daytona rear seat on it, which sort of came up and then humped over. it also had Micron Ripspeed exhausts on it. The one in the picture is a 400cc. It's exactly the same bike. The displacement's just slightly different on the 400. Obviously a bit bigger. But that bike was good. Good for 110 miles an hour. It used to scream. Absolutely howl. So I had that. And then I passed my test. I'll keep that one quiet. And then I passed my test and I was still riding around on the RD250, but all my mates had bigger bikes like a Bandit 600 and a GS500. They're not big bikes, but when you're on an RD250, they're on 4 strokes and, you know. So I was coming up to 20 years old and Yamaha were doing a deal. They just brought out the TRX 850. And if you were 20 years old, you could have fully comp insurance for free for 2 years. So I went over and bought it, but Mum says I wasn't allowed to have 2 motorbikes. I had to trade the RD250 in, which was a bit of a shame because if I'd have still got that, they were worth a lot of money. So anyway, onto the TRX 850. Parallel twin with a 270-degree crank, so it fires like a V-twin. It goes boom, 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 boom. So you get that drive out of the corners. It was only about 85 horsepower, but it was absolutely stonking. The first week I had to run it in. He said, don't take it over 4,000 RPM. And I did it properly. Took it back the next week for the oil change and everything, and he says, you can just go for it now. Anyway, on the way home, oh my God. You know, it's only 85 horsepower, but it didn't weigh a lot. It was only about 170 kilos. And I was a little bit slimmer at the time. The thing's just mental. Absolutely sliding back in the seat, all that kind of thing. Anyway, I had that for a year and a half and I did almost 30,000 miles on that bike in a year and a half. I took it back to the place where I bought it from and how much for a trade-in. And they said, well, we'll give you 1,500 quid for it. And I was like, I've just paid 7,200 for that. Because back in those days, in the early 90s, oh no, it was 97, I was 20. UK bike prices were quite high and there was a lot of grey imports coming into the country and they was knocking them out quite cheap. So I bought the TRX 850 at £7,200. The month afterwards, UK bike prices were slashed by £2,000 to compete with the grey market. At the time I thought, oh well, you know, I've got my new bike, I'll never want to trade this in. But you always want something a bit better. And it wasn't getting ropey, it was just, there was a knocking noise on the engine and nobody could fathom out what it was. And I thought, you know what, it's going to leave me stranded somewhere one day. So I went to another bike shop and they offered me about $3,000 for it. And I thought, well, it's not the 7,200 I paid for it, but got to cut your losses. So I traded the TRX 850 in for this ZX7R. No, ZX7R. The earlier version was the ZXR 750. Now this was the bike that they were using on World Superbikes at the time. At the time, the 4 cylinders superbikes, they were limited to 750cc. So you had the ZX7R, the GSXR 750, and then you had the Ducati 916. They were allowed the 1000cc because they were V-twin. Anyway, pick that up. Oh my God, hell of a lot more powerful. It's a bit more focused. It's upside down forks. The brakes are better. Everything was better than the TRX 850. But I did still like the TRX 850. I mean, it had a unique sound. You know, I had carbon cans on it and it was really pucker, that bike. Anyway, the ZX7, it was quite focused as a sports bike with all the suspension and stuff like that. And yeah, I had that for quite a while, quite a couple of years. I put a single seat conversion, which was a ZX7RR, as you'll see in the picture. Put that seat conversion on it, and I did have an exhaust pipe. I did buy an Akrapovic full system for it, because I stripped the bike down and I was going to polish all the frame up and bits and pieces. I needed to change the swing arm bearings, and while it was stripped down, I bought an Akrapovic system, full titanium. But I went into a bike shop just to have a browse and made the mistake of trading that bike in. I also had my brother's bike, which I swapped for a bass amplifier. That was a little VFR 400. all in Rothman's colours. That was a nice little bike, but it had some issues. So I traded that one in, traded the ZX7R and my ex-wife's bike. I traded that in. And then we're on to the ZX12. This bike, oh my God. It was a monster, absolute beast. The ZX12, when they first came out, now this was the 2001 that I had, was the full power version. They weren't restricted. Later on, a couple of years after this, they restricted them to 185 miles an hour. I think the figure was about 190 horsepower, give or take, I'm not sure. But the speedo on the ZX12 went all the way around to 220 miles an hour. And I did get the needle quite a long way round. It's not going as fast as that, because speedos aren't ever so accurate, but the bloody thing, it was a missile. First gear was really peaky, because it was the early versions of fuel injection, so that the throttle could be like an on and off switch, and you could spin the back wheel up very, very easy in first gear. So you had to be careful of that. But it was just a missile, absolute beast of a bike. And I did have it for a while, but after I didn't get caught speeding. I've never been caught speeding on a motorbike. Touch wood. But whether I incriminate myself now in this video, I don't know. Anyway, we had the speedo a long way round, so it was sort of doing that. I went past my ex-wife and my mate, and we all had bike-to-bike intercoms, and they was going quite fast, well over 100, 130, 140. I went past them like they was going backwards, and they said all they could hear was me laughing. Anyway, a week after that, I got rid of it, and I ended up with this. A Yamaha XT660 Supermoto. So we went from 190 horsepower, 4-cylinder beast of a bike to a single-cylinder pop-pop. It was pretty good. It was fuel injected, but it was a bit of a wheelie machine. Now, I come to France on the ZX12. Came to France in the snow on the ZX12. Did 800-900 miles in the snow and ice. That's a story for another day. Didn't spin the wheel up once. And the only mishap, almost, was I got to the bottom of Mum and Dad's drive, and there's no way I could have ridden the bike up because it was covered in snow and it was too steep. But I didn't want to leave the bike down on the drive, on the roadside, because it's 500 metres from the house. Phoned my dad, I said I'm at the bottom of the drive. So he said, I'll come down and tow you up. So he reversed down the drive, and he had a 4x4, a Frontera, Vauxhall Frontera. And I was sat there on the bike, and he's coming down, and he couldn't stop. He just managed to bring it to a standstill about a foot away from my front wheel. So I got all that way without a mishap and nearly got knocked off by my dad. But we didn't, and that was an experience. If you ever want to hear about that story, I'll talk about it on a live stream or something, because it is quite a long story. But anyway, XT660. I came to France on that twice. It would cruise nicely at 75 miles an hour. Any more than that, and it was just uncomfortable. It wasn't really a touring bike. It's a single cylinder. I'm not sure how powerful they are. All loaded up with gear and stuff. One time we came down with a group of bikers. So there was a Blackbird, a Hayabusa, a Pan-European, and me on the 660. I don't think I held them back too much, but it wasn't ideal. Anyway, so I get back to the UK, and I'm missing the sports bikes. So I've still got the XT, and I had plans for that. I bought some parts, some trick suspension parts and that. I was going to soup it up a little bit. But I did miss the power of the sports bike. So I went into the bike shop, one of the local ones, when I lived in Peterborough. There they had this sitting. Honda SP1. It was a 2001, maybe 2000. No, it was definitely a late 2001. Absolutely beautiful, not a mark on it. And I kept looking at it, sat on it, and I thought, do I? Don't I? Anyway, I ended up buying it. So I had the XT and the SP1 at the same time. What a monster that was. It was... Hondas to me are quite plain and boring. Not boring that they can't do anything, because I've had a Fireblade, which we'll get to in a minute. Hondas, all the ones that I've ridden, just do everything perfectly. You know, on the Fireblade, I could get my knee down at 20 miles an hour around a roundabout, piece of cake, no problem at all. You know, you go in a car park, you just do a circle, you can get your knee down. It would do everything you wanted it to. With the Kawasaki's, I found that they had a bit of animal in them, if you know what I mean. If you're a biker, you'll know, and if you've ridden Kawasaki's, you'll probably know. There's a bit of an edge to a Kawasaki. But anyway, this SP1, what a beast. Basically, it's a track bike, and the only reason that they had them on the road was to qualify for racing. They had to homologate so many for the road. So this SP1, they just stuck a headlight in the front of it, put some number plates and lights on it, and away you go. You've got a road bike. But luckily, I'd had a bit of experience with bikes, because if you hadn't had a lot of experience, the thing would have thrown you off. It really was a track-focused bike. I could go round roundabouts. I mean, my brother witnessed it. He said he was, because he had a Fireblade, which you'll see in this picture. That's when we had a little road trip up to the Peak District. He would follow me. I'd go round a roundabout and give it some beans, and it would leave black tyre marks on the roundabout as I'm going round it. I mean, that's it. I could get through a back tyre in 800 miles easy. It just used to chew the arse out of tyres. That's the only bike I've had where I've really had to struggle to hold on because of the power delivery. 1000cc V-twin, they're about 150 horsepower, something like that. With the standard cans on, it would get up to 150 miles an hour because it had a digital speedo, and it'd go 151, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it would just creep up. And I thought this out because I'd go out with my mate and he had a Z750, and he would be neck and neck with me. He was flat out at 150, laying on the tank, on a private road, of course. Anyway, I thought this can't be right. So I had the carbon cans. From the Carbon Can Company. They was aluminium ones, or stainless, well, shiny ones anyway. I had them on the XT. So I said to the Carbon Can Company, can you do some down link pipes for those cans to put on the SP1? Fair enough, they sent them out, lovely jubbly, fitted them on. Oh, what a sound, absolutely beautiful. Gets out on the private road again, mate's on his 750, and it just left him for dead. It was a totally different bike with those original cans, which were about that round, and I think they had catalytic converters in them. It was obviously the bike was trying to breathe like through a straw. Put the open cans on it. What an absolute mental machine that was. It was bang, 170 miles an hour. You know, I looked in my mirror, he wasn't anywhere to be seen. Did have some issues with it. I would hit some bumps and it would cut out, drop down to one cylinder, fire back. And when you've only got two cylinders, when you lose one of them, it's not ever so clever. Took it back. I don't want to name any names, but it's a company that I don't think are there anymore. But I think it's the same people. In Peterborough. Bunch of twats, basically. I took it in there and they kept fobbing me off. We can't look at it for a fortnight. I said, bullshit. I said, I've just bought the bike. It needs fixing now. Anyway, they was dragging it out, and then they said, oh, it's we fixed it. So I goes into, what was it? Oh, it's, that's right, because they was fobbing me off. They said, it's the pulse generator, and it's this. And I said, you what? Pulse generator? I know, obviously, there's something that generates a spark. It wasn't that at all. They said we fixed it. I went in to pick it up. They said, it's your immobiliser, so we've removed it. I said, so the bike hasn't got an immobiliser now? But yeah, that's right. Great, well done. But anyway, I was just glad to get it back. So I'll go for a bit of a ride. Now, where I was living in Peterborough was, my brother, he'd had his bike nicked from the back garden, so we used to keep the bikes in the house. At the time, I had a big 4-bedroom sort of, not a terrace house, but it was in a terrace, but it's 4 bedrooms. Living room, lounge, living room, dining room, kitchen, a study, downstairs toilet and all that. So we used to keep the motorbikes in the study. So I get the SP1 in there and come down in the morning, absolutely reeking of petrol. So I have a look at the SP1 and there's petrol dripping out where they've had all the tank off. dripping out onto the back exhaust pipe. Charming. I was really pissed off. So I went round to another motorbike shop just to have a look, and I'd already traded the ZX12 in at this one for the XT660. So I goes in there and they got this CBR 1000RR. 2004. It was less than 6 months old. And I kept looking at it, and the salesman, they all knew me in there, and said, do you want to take it out for a spin? And I was like, no, I've got two motorbikes. I said, well, just take it for a spin, see what you think. Anyway, I take it out. And if you've ridden a Fireblade, the CBR 1000RR, you'll know it is fantastic. It did everything. It goes around corners, it stops, it goes. It is a good bike. So I ended up trading the XT660 and the SP1 in for the CBR 1000RR. So that brings us on to the Fireblade. Absolutely mental bike, yet again. I did some tweaks to it. It came with the underseat exhaust, obviously, because that's standard, but it had, I think they were laser. But it sounded beautiful. It had the twin pipes coming out the back. Absolutely beautiful sound. Anyway, I had it for a while, and I'd been out on it, riding around, getting my knee down, popping wheelies, riding like a pillock. I decided I'd had enough and I was going to go home, because I used to have funny days off during the week when nobody else was about, so riding around used to get a bit boring after a while. It was when I decided to slow down and relax and have a bimble home that I went round a roundabout. Sun blasted in my eyes. It was just a total whiteout. I couldn't see a bloody thing. So I sort of got on the brakes a little bit, but by that time the front wheel hit the curb. I went sailing through the air, collarbone into the road sign. There's no give in the road signs, I'll tell you now. They're not made of rubber. Bust the old collarbone. Bike's laying on its side. Oh, jeez. Anyway, there's a place in Peterborough called the Magic Roundabout. If you're a biker in that area, you'll know all about that place. Anyway, I'm on my knees, bike's on its side, my arm's all buggered up. I'm trying to flag cars down. About 16 cars went past, nobody stopped. Anyway, these couple of foreigners pulled over. Are you all right? You all right? I said, yeah. I said, get my helmet off. No, we can't take you out. I said, oh, look, I've not been knocked out. I'm fine. Take my helmet off. I can't breathe. So they took my helmet off and phoned an ambulance. Of course, I had a full one-piece racing suit. Ambulance crew turns up. We want to cut it off. And I'm like, oh, no. Of course, the old Bill turns up. The bike's lying on its side. And, of course, as you know, I used to work for a recovery firm. And I knew most of the police, especially the traffic police. And they're like, oh, Ben, it's you've crashed your bike. Oh. He said, well, we've stood your bike up. No, that's right. I thought, I'm fully comp insured, it covers my levers, covers the bike, sod it, cut my levers off. So they went straight across the back of my shoulders and the levers just fell on the floor. I'm sat in the ambulance, they put a thing under my arm and pulled my arm like that so that it pulled my collarbone apart again. And then the policeman come on the ambulance, he said, oh, Ben, it's your bike. He said, we've stood it up and there's no damage on it. Oh, shit, well, I won't be claiming for the insurance on the bike. Anyway, long story short, I was recovering a long time with this collarbone. I had 7 weeks off work, got myself in a lot of trouble financially because sick pay was rubbish. While I was off sick, went to the Birmingham NEC bike show, bought some parts for it, soup it up. So I had 10 Carte velocity stacks on the injection throttle bodies, fancy air filter, modified all the ram air on it, changed the gearing on the sprockets. It turned it into a bit of a mental beast, actually. You could be doing 130 miles an hour in the right gear, crack open the throttle and the front wheel was up in the air. You had to be on the ball with it. That was speed limited to 185 miles an hour, but I'm not quite sure because the speedo used to stop at 185. That's right, the speedo was digital, the rev counter was analog. The speed used to stop at 185, but the needle used to keep going for the revs. So I'm not quite sure, but it was plenty quick enough. But almost a year after I had the accident, it got stolen. So yeah, we had builders working on the house, and at the time, so whether it was a bit of an inside job, I don't know. But anyway, it was fully comp. The insurance company weren't going to pay the full value of the bike. I says, well, there's the finance company, that's the insurance company, deal with it between yourselves. You're not getting a penny out of me. And that's how I left it. I wasn't going to have a motorbike after that. Now, previously I said my brother had the Fireblade, which you saw in that picture. He decided that was too fast, because we used to go out and just go mental. And he did say that he was using it for work and just going quick on it, and he was going to lose his license. So he was going to trade it in for a KTM Supermoto, which he did do. First couple of days, he was taking it back to have a, because I said to him they should have put a new tyre on the back of that because it's bald. So he got in touch with them, and they were like, oh yeah. This was the company who cocked up the SP1, by the way. So anyway, he was riding it back to them. Went round a corner, hit a wet manhole cover. Arse end came out of the bike and it slid underneath a transit van. And I was working at a place up the road, and he come in the garage and the bike was all like this. He said, I've just come off it. He said, I think something's a bit wrong. And I looked at it, it was as twisted up as buggery. The frame had all bent out of shape. So he decided we was going to rebuild it. So we just went top to bottom, stripped it down, brand new frame. That was a 2002 bike. Now in the 2003 they strengthened the frame up, so we bought the 2003 frame and put all the engine in with silicone hoses. He bought a brand new Akrapovic system. We got it all built up. Then he took it into a place near Wisbeach who used to specialise in the KTM LC4s. Got it on the rolling road all set up, and it was quite a mental machine. And then all of a sudden he says, I don't really want it anymore. He says, do you want it? And take over the finance payments. So I was like, oh, yeah, all right then. So anyway, I move out to France and bring the KTM with me. And yeah, good bike. What did I have to do? I had some, the fork seals were leaking. I did that. I think one of the wheels was slightly bent out of shape when he crashed it, so it did have a little wobble on it, but nothing too much. I was running it around in France, but I couldn't get it registered very easily because you need a certificate of conformity. For motorbikes in France, you don't need an MOT for, but you had to have a certificate of conformity. Now, you can only get a partial certificate of conformity from KTM because certificate of conformities for motorbikes didn't come out until 2003. So I put it up for sale, nobody wanted it. And then somebody said, if you ever want to strip it down, I'll give you X amount for the exhaust pipe. Oh, okay. So anyway, stripped it down, sold the exhaust pipe, sold the engine. The bloke wanted the engine in Saint-Tropez, and he said to post it. And I was like, I can't post an engine because it was 40-something kilos, this engine. Postal service would only send up to 30 kilos. And in the end, he said, well, if you can drive it down here, I'll give you €300. So the Hobbit, myself and the dog at the time had a little drive down to Saint-Tropez with this engine, come away with nearly €1,000. So that was that. Sold the wheels. It all went. And the last bits I had were frame and some bits and pieces with the logbook. A French chap bought that. So that was it. Done with motorbikes. And then, as I say, the Suzuki Bandit came up. 3,400 miles on the clock. Brand new. It was on UK plates though. But he'd been through to the dealer and had everything stamped to say that it was good for EU roads, basically. He got the headlight, but he hadn't swapped it over, so I did all that. The oil cooler was leaking because I think he dropped it in his garage. It had engine bars on it, but whatever it fell on hit the oil cooler. So I put a new one of those on it. It did have a bit of a misfire, but it was like brand new, absolutely mint. And I rode it up the road once and brought it back, and then the winter came, and then I ended up in hospital. So I sold it for $2,500. So it was quite a good one, that. And that's it for motorbikes. My history of motorbikes. I've obviously ridden quite a few different ones, but those are the ones that I've owned. Do I miss it? A little bit. My cousin's got a bike, my brother's got a bike. when they come here on it, it's sort of like, yeah. But as I say, obviously I'm in the wheelchair now, so it's not really a, you know, I'm hoping that I can get walking again, because, you know, we're still doing the exercise, physio's still coming. But as for motorbikes, I don't think I shall bother, because I say I'm quite happy just pooling around the field on the tractor, going out in the Range Rover where it's nice and comfortable. If it's a hot day, you can put the cold seats on. If it's a cold day, you can put the hot seats on. And it's just nice. Whereas you go out on a bike, whatever weather, you've got to put all your gear on, because I've had a few accidents. First one was on the old FS1E. Like a prat, I was out up and down a dirt track with my mate from school on the back, wearing shorts. I did something and he started wobbling about on the back, 'cause he was a big old boy at the time. And the old bike started getting into a bit of a tank slapper. Down it goes. So my knee goes all through the gravel. Lovely. Gets to the hospital and the doctor said, it was only a local hospital, doctor said 2 methods of cleaning it. One with the scrubbing brush, one with the operating theatre method. And I don't fancy the scrubbing brush, because obviously it hurt. It looked like a raw, where it ripped all my knee open, it looked like a sort of raw beef burger. He said, this new method we got, he said, we squirt acid in and it froths up and lifts all the grit out. Okay, let's try that. Oh my, I thought my leg was coming off. So they put that on, it froths up. You see all the grit coming out, they wash it off and it's like, oh, lovely. And then they do it again. That's the first accident. Then on the ZX7R, I had an accident where I was coming up a big, it used to be a 3-lane road, left and right, and then a middle lane for overtaking. So if someone was overtaking coming towards you, you obviously couldn't use that lane, but if there was nothing in it, you could go in that lane to overtake. Weird idea, but, you know. So it was been changed to a 2-lane road, so it's quite wide. Anyway, going up, the car in front of me, she swerved over to the left. So I thought, okay, she's seen me. So I put my indicator on, went to overtake. I'm about 10 to 6 feet away from the back of her car, and there's a junction, and she swerved across to the middle of the road. Of course, I'm on the brakes, but, you know, 60, 70 miles an hour, my knee hit the back of her car and my hand, and I went down the side of her car and pulled up in front of her. She was like in shock, crying her eyes out, and then she looked at me, because obviously, if you've seen, I've got a bit of a funny finger. It's been like that most of my life, but I took my gloves off, there was blood everywhere, and she thought she'd done that. So I had to reassure her that no, my finger's always like that. Anyway, my knee was pretty bad. She was meeting she'd left her husband at home and she was meeting her boyfriend down the old road, and that's where this little junction was. But she'd seen me, pulled over to let me pass, but then realised she wanted to go down there, so in the last minute panicked and shot across the road. In hindsight, I should have known that that was a junction, and anything is possible at junctions, but because she'd swerved over, you know. Anyway, that was that. And then the Fireblade one. So, yeah, all in all, that's my life with motorbikes. I've quite enjoyed it, and I don't think I should be going back to it, to be honest. I should be building some little buggies and stuff, I think, for messing around here later on down the line when we've got some other projects out of the way. But yeah, so I don't really miss it, but I would like another one. It's one of them things, isn't it? So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. There's a bit of an insight into my past with 2 wheels. There are a lot of stories that go around it, but I won't bore you with all of those. I'll have to put it in a book or something. So that's it for this video. Please give it a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And from me and the Hobbit, who's popped out somewhere, it's bye for now.